All right, here we go. So being mindful of everyone's time, it is 5 after. Alexandra's going to keep letting people on into the waiting room, but we're going to get underway. So welcome to TBI and PTSD, the science and yoga of healing. This is presented by Veterans Yoga Project and LoveYourBrain. My name is Sam Miravalli. I am the CMO of Veterans Yoga Project, and my pronouns are she and her. As a facilitator for both of these organizations, I have personally had the privilege of seeing the amazing impact that they have on the lives of people that they serve. It has been an honor and a privilege to be involved with both of these organizations. LYB and VYP are both nonprofits for anyone who hasn't been introduced to us. We serve the TBI and veterans communities. It is our mission to provide education, community, and resources to improve the quality of life for all veterans, military families, and communities, and people who have been affected by TBI. This includes caregivers and family members. We would love your support in fulfilling our mission. So here's the little pitch. Please donate by texting the letters VYP to 707070. All donations received from this panel will be shared evenly 50-50 between VYP and LoveYourBrain. A few quick housekeeping items before we begin. Please orientate yourself to the chat. If you are joining us in Zoom, we have Alexandra, who is the VYP Director of Training Programs. And if you are joining us on YouTube, we have the wonderful Libby, who is the LYB Director of Yoga Programs. Both are absolutely wonderful and we'll be able to answer all your questions. And I will be popping in and out of both as well. Please leave all of your questions in the chat. We are going to be collecting them for our moderator, and we will do our best to answer as many questions as we can at the end. Please also make sure that you keep yourself muted throughout this so that everyone can hear. And we will share all the relevant links in the chat for the event as well. The most common question is, yes, after the event, you will receive a follow-up email with the replay and the links we share today. With that, I am overjoyed to hand the mic to the wonderful Kyla to lead us in a centering practice before our conversation begins.
Thank you so much, Sam. And to all of you who are joining us from truly across, it looks like the United States and Canada and beyond. So I'm really looking forward to having a moment for all of us to land together and arrive, since I know the Zoom commute can be sometimes a little disorienting. So for the next few minutes, we'll offer some guidance in how we can all set the tone for our time and space together. So as we move into a moment of pause, we'll invite you to set aside anything that you don't need for the next few minutes. You might find a way to be in your body that brings a sense of steadiness. You might find some gentle movements like a little rock side to side, and really begin to feel into the presence of your body in this moment. So without any rush, slowly arrive in as much stillness as feels grounding and steadying for you. You're welcome to lower your gaze to one spot on the floor, or perhaps glide your eyes closed. And to help us gather our attention, let's begin with a slow, full breath in. Feel your lungs expand. And a slow, smooth breath out, feeling a release. Good, again. Slow, full breath in, feel your lungs expand. And a slow, easy breath out, feeling a release. Allow your breath to move freely. Simply feel it flow in and out in a pace that's just right for you. No effort, no managing. Just simply receive each breath with a soft belly, with an open heart, bringing some curiosity and kindness to how you're showing up physically in this moment. Allow any obvious places of tension in your body to perhaps release a little more fully. You might soften through your jaw, just moving it side to side. Allow your tongue to soften, just feeling a pool of sensation within your mouth. Your shoulders release away from your ears as you feel your arms heavy and at ease by your sides. Sensing or imagining any sensations within your palms, perhaps a tingling or an aliveness in your fingertips. Sensing downward to your legs, and sensing the steady pressure of where your seat connects to a chair or whatever support is beneath you. Your feet down to the floor. Allow the natural weight of your body to release a little more fully downward, as you also feel and know the earth is rising up to meet you. Bringing some awareness to your mind with kind awareness, just checking in if it feels distracted or busy, or perhaps content, or anything in between. Just welcoming however your mind is in this moment, as we all acknowledge where we're starting from. Let's all take a slow, full breath in, feel your lungs expand. And a slow, easy breath out. And finally, sensing into the space of your heart, to this tender and courageous space. You might feel it beating a little faster right now, like I do. But sensing into the warmth of this place, a reminder of the goodness of your intentions to be here, coming from perhaps lived experience with TBI or PTS. Perhaps you support this community in other ways. So for a moment, sending appreciation for your desire to be here and to learn and grow. There are many other places you could be right now. So offering yourself some gratitude or appreciation. And also sensing out to all of those who are joining us for the goodness of their intentions, for showing up from a place of care. And in your own way, sending out your appreciation to this full community. And also know, as you send out your appreciation, each person is also sending it to you. And also sensing out to all of those. Let's take a final full breath in together. Feel your heart lift and expand. And a slow, easy breath out. And without any rush, it's beginning to re-arrive in our space. And you might catch the little box of someone that you can see and send them a welcome and thank you for being here. And in advance, thank you for the graciousness with our team for all the little things that come up in these events, but truly sensing into the intentions and the goodness of intentions that are here. So thanks all, and back to you, Sam.
Thank you so much. That was such a beautiful practice, Kyla. I love it when I get to stop in on a Kyla opening or closing a meditation. I would like to welcome the very wonderful Josh Maloney, who is our moderator today. He is a veteran. He is a yoga teacher for Veterans Yoga Project, and he will be guiding our much anticipated panel discussion with the following panelists. Welcome panelists, Dr. Eric Wan, who is the President and Chief Medical Officer of Wave Neuroscience. He is a very clever man. Dr. Dan Libby, my boss, and even more importantly, my friend, who is the founder and CEO of Veterans Yoga Project. And as we all know, the incredibly wonderful and talented Dr. Kyla Pierce, our Senior Director of Programs and Research for Love Your Brain. Welcome. Thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for all you do for our collective communities. And it's over to you, Josh.
Thank you, Sam. It's truly wonderful to be with all of you today. Before we get into the conversation, I'd like to introduce some of our esteemed panelists. Dr. Eric Wan, he, him pronouns. He's the President and Chief Medical Officer of Wave Neuroscience, a biotechnology company that has innovated breakthrough technologies called magnetic resonance therapy, or MERT, and synchronized transcranial magnetic stimulation, STIMS. Eric joined Wave Neuroscience after serving as a chief physician and chief technical officer healthcare services for the Boeing company. He also served as a U.S. Navy flight surgeon for the Marine Medium Helicopter Squadron 268 and received the distinction of serving as the ace flight surgeon for the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, 1st Marine Expeditionary Force. Dr. Kyla Pierce, pronoun she, her. She is the Senior Director of Programs and Research for Love Your Brain. And she oversees the design, implementation, and evaluation of the Love Your Brain programs. Kyla has blended her expertise as a yoga and mindfulness teacher and practitioner, researcher, and advocate to develop evidence-based TBI-centered yoga and mindfulness curricula, which she trains yoga teachers and clinicians to deliver through yoga studios and healthcare facilities across the United States and Canada. She also completed a postdoctoral research fellowship at Dartmouth College, investigating the effectiveness of yoga and meditation for people with neurological conditions. Dr. Dan Libby, pronouns he, him. He is the founder and CEO of Veterans Yoga Project. Based psychotherapies and complementary and alternative medicine practices for the treatment of PTSD and other psychological and emotional distresses in active duty and military veterans. As a postdoctoral fellow, investigation of complementary and alternative medicine in VA PTSD programs. He is also the former director of clinical services for the Starlight Military Rehabilitation Program. So to get our conversation going, let's gain a deeper understanding of the similarities between PTSD and TBI. So for those of you who may not know much about PTSD, I'd like to invite Dan to provide some background about PTSD. Dr. Dan Libby.
Thank you very much, Josh. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate everyone being here. It's fun to see so many old friends and new friends joining us. Post-traumatic stress, and sometimes we put the D in parentheses, disorder, to de-emphasize the fact that it is a disorder and to emphasize the fact that it is a normal reaction, right, to some extraordinary circumstances. And the way we often understand post-traumatic stress is that it's a disorder, or a combination of symptoms that happen after a traumatic event, an event in which it was so overwhelming that your body and mind weren't able to really process and integrate what was happening at the time, and then often results in post-traumatic stress symptoms, which sometimes we think of as, you know, the intrusive symptoms, things like flashbacks, intrusive memories about the event, nightmares. We think about changes in arousal and how our body is reacting, avoidance being one of the primary symptom clusters. But I think one of the best ways to really understand post-traumatic stress is less from that clinical perspective and what the DSM says, and more understanding it from the survivor's perspective. And the way we understand trauma and post-traumatic stress is that a traumatic event, by definition, is an event that lacks safety, it lacks predictability, and it lacks control. And when somebody undergoes this traumatic event, very often at the time of that trauma, their internal world, their thoughts, their body, and their behavior also lack predictability, lack control, and lack safety. And for when somebody continues to have these symptoms, post-traumatic stress can be seen as someone who's living in a world where the external environment seems unsafe and unpredictable and uncontrollable. But my internal environment is also unsafe and unpredictable and controllable. I can't predict or control when my body's going to start sweating, my heart's going to pound out of my chest. I can't predict or control when my mind is going to start, you know, ruminating or focusing on one thing, when I'm going to have these intrusive thoughts and images. And I think most debilitating is I can't predict or control what I'm going to do and how I'm going to react in the world and how I'm going to interact with others. And despite my best efforts and not wanting to be reactive or whatnot, very often that's what happens. And so we understand post-traumatic stress really from that survivor's perspective as really being one where I went through this event where the external world was unsafe and unpredictable and controllable. My internal world was unsafe, unpredictable, and controllable. And the external and internal worlds continue to lack that safe, predictable, and controllable environment. So ultimately, it's a disorder that results in disempowerment.
Thank you, Dan. That's very enlightening about PTSD. Kyla, can you give us some background on TBI, traumatic brain injury?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And I feel like I always learn so much when Dan is speaking. So thanks, Dan, for opening with that. And also, before I start talking about TBI, just a gentle reminder for folks where the content of what we're speaking about may be activating to do what you need, either turn away from the camera, take your video off, or find ways to resource yourselves throughout our time together. So with TBI, so the CDC defines traumatic brain injury as a blow or jolt to the head or body that causes a disruption in brain functioning. So this often happens with falls, with motor vehicle accidents, with assaults, and other reasons where people are struck by an object. And it's very complex and common. So in the United States alone, the best estimates are at least 2.8 million people have a traumatic brain injury every year. And we know that's a major underrepresentation of the true prevalence, given that a lot of people don't actually show up to the emergency department and receive care. And with TBI, the way that sometimes I like to talk about it is, if you think about your brain, there are over or around 80 to 100 billion neurons in your brain. And you can think of neurons as the building blocks of the brain. And with the TBI, it's almost like an earthquake, where there's some sort of disruption to the brain that can cause obvious damage, like an earthquake, but also a lot of damage that is more hidden. So if you think about the electrical systems or the plumbing systems that you can't see below the surface, but they're disconnected. So with TBI, often what happens is not only there's damage to the brain at the point of contact, but the brain, since it's floating in cerebral spinal fluid, shakes within the brain back and forth. And therefore it causes damage to the other side of the place of contact, and then also to the neurons that are sending and responsible for sending signals throughout the brain. So traumatic brain injury is known as a diffuse injury, which means it impacts multiple parts of the brain, which is why it makes it so complicated and difficult to treat in some ways. That also means that there is many different types of symptoms that can arise, and all TBIs are different. So there can be physical symptoms like challenges with balance, coordination, weakness on one side of the body. There can be cognitive impacts such as to memory, decision-making, focus. There can also be oftentimes psychological impacts. So some of what Dan was talking about was related to nervous system dysregulation. That can also happen with TBI, as well as anxiety and depression are often common symptoms that can happen after an injury. The one important point is TBI is often defined in 3 categories: mild, moderate, and severe. Mild TBI is also often known as concussion. And so some people don't necessarily think that concussion is a type of TBI, but it is actually the most common type of TBI. And while about 80% of people with concussions will, after several months, go on to fully recover, a sizable proportion will have ongoing symptoms that I know Dr. Wan will be speaking about different innovations for how to support treatment. And the last takeaway is, although there is this definition of mild, moderate, and severe TBI, that doesn't correlate to the severity of symptoms. So someone with mild TBI or concussion can have very severe symptoms and have it be a very debilitating injury. So if you hear someone say, I have a mild traumatic brain injury, it doesn't mean that the experience is mild.
Thank you, Kyla. Listening to you speak right after Dan, I certainly hear some similarities. I'm sure there's several unique aspects about our conversation today between TBI and PTSD. Dan, can you speak to some of these similarities and differences?
I can sure try. It's true that very often you see post-traumatic stress and TBI comorbid or happening at the same time, especially if you think about a traumatic brain injury. Very often the cause of that injury is some sort of event that might have been interpreted as being traumatic. I think Kyla pointed out some of the domains of cognitive functioning that are affected, like executive functioning, memory, visual spatial, there's so many different things that our brain does. And just as TBI is a fairly heterogeneous disorder as far as individuals with PTSD, with TBI might be expressing very different symptoms. Same thing happens in post-traumatic stress, where there is, if you actually look at all of these symptoms of post-traumatic stress, there's actually 636,000 different combinations of symptoms that you can have in order to get a PTSD diagnosis, right? So what we understand is that even as we talk about these disorders, that there definitely are similarities, but there are those differences. I do think that what often happens with PTSD and TBI is that when somebody is dealing with both of those things at the same time, it really makes treatment that much more difficult, really, to understand the etiology of a particular symptom and how those things interact with one another. I would say that, kind of going back to the way I interpret post-traumatic stress is when you're dealing with traumatic brain injury and a lot of health challenges, is the same level of disempowerment, right? Where all of a sudden, you were able to do a lot of things, you have this brain injury, and despite your best efforts, your body won't actually do what you're telling it to do, right? Your mind might not actually be doing what you want it to do. And so this idea of being disempowered by these disorders, and the need for empowerment, and the need for tools and therapies that allow me to gain a sense of myself again. So I don't know if that answers your question, but perhaps Kyla, you have more to say about that.
Thank you, Dan. We'll be exploring this more. I think you did a fantastic job of answering that. This conversation is going to develop a little bit. I'd love to hear from Dr. Wan. Dr. Wan, what are some of the most important things to know about the comorbidity between PTS and TBI?
Sure. Well, so first, it's really an honor to be here with all of you. And Dr. Libby and Dr. Pierce really described so elegantly both unique characteristics of PTS and TBI and some of the commonalities between them.
John, I sent you the info about the...
From a neurobiological perspective, similarly, there's disruptions in neural circuits and neural networks, and we tend to look at those as distinct and different, but the experience of the individual, it tends to be pretty similar in the sense that there can be increased irritability, slowing of cognitive processing speed, disruptions in sleep. These tend to be some of the hallmarks of the experience. The differences are interesting that there's some really nice studies done by the Department of Veterans Affairs where they found there's reductions in the size of the hippocampus and predominantly changes in the neural circuits of the prefrontal cortex and post-traumatic stress. Those are fairly unique features, hippocampus being associated with emotional regulation. And so we can see how this might manifest in our day-to-day life. And so, yes, there's roughly, the estimates are 25 to 40% comorbidity between traumatic brain injury, concussion, and post-traumatic stress. And importantly, how we might approach those strategically from individual to individual. We would want to customize and personalize to each individual. And so, we can, I think, speak down the road about the different approaches and modalities, but yoga, meditation, these contemplative arts certainly are universal, and I think can be applied to just about everyone. So I'll stop there, and excited to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wan. Now, thinking about some of the solutions, I'm hearing that TBI and PTS certainly represent a unique set of challenges. I think that each of you listening to you speak have developed solutions through mindfulness, science, and research that are building resilience in these healing processes. I'd like to first explore some of the programs that Love Your Brain and Veterans Yoga Project have developed. Kyla, will you tell us about Love Your Brain's programs and research?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So Love Your Brain has been around for almost 8 years by now. We were founded when one of the co-founders experienced a severe traumatic brain injury himself, and him and his brother, who is the other co-founder of Love Your Brain, saw that there was a huge gap in access to community-based services that supported people by traumatic brain injury, affected by traumatic brain injury, to build resilience. And so we as an organization talk much more about the idea of resilience versus recovery, knowing that TBI can have long-lasting impacts to each person's functioning and identity. So really coming in from the lens of building what's strong instead of fixing what's wrong. So we built our programs using yoga, mindfulness, and community connection as really the bedrocks. So right now we have a yoga program that is an evidence-based yoga program built on the science of resilience. And so really what we mean by resilience is how to move through adversity and find new meaning and purpose. So to more effectively move through adversity. And there's a really great book written by two VA doctors, I believe, Stephen Southwick and Dennis Charney, called The Science of Mastering Life's Greatest Challenges. And in this book, the doctors interview a range of people who've experienced complex trauma. And what they identified were 10 qualities that folks who embodied resilience in times of intense adversity embodied. So our yoga program, each of the 6 sessions in the yoga program is designed around one of these qualities of resilience. So for instance, having role models that you can emulate their qualities and use as a source of inspiration. And you could even think for yourself for a moment, in times of adversity, who do you look for to help you move through difficult challenges? And you might have 1 or 2 people that help you feel inspired to move through challenge. So I won't go through the other factors, but we've built our programs and researched them, and our research has found that people with TBI and caregivers, so we serve both people with TBI and caregivers, show improvements in resilience, quality of life, cognition, emotional behavior dysregulation, and positive affect, so both mood and cognitive capabilities. So right now we're really working to blend community-based yoga programs with immersive retreats that are holistic health interventions that blend mindfulness, movement, nutrition, and community connection. And then during the pandemic also evolved our in-person yoga program into an online program called Love Your Brain Mindset that builds on our curriculum, incorporates Carol Dweck's work around growth versus fixed mindset to really set folks with TBI and caregivers up for skills, long-lasting skills for how to relate to their TBI experience and build resilience through the practices of yoga and mindfulness that are really all about self-compassion, awareness, emotional regulation. So we now have a program that is really designed to meet each person wherever they are in their healing journey. And I'm happy to share more of our research, but I'll pause there and hand it back to you, Josh.
Kyla, Love Your Brain really sounds like an amazing organization. It looks like they're looking at the whole person, which is really nice. Looking over at the CEO and founder of Veterans Yoga Project, Dan, can you do something similar and talk about some of VYP's Veteran Yoga Project's programs and research?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I think all of our programs are based on a premise, and the premise is that we know that the physical body heals itself, right? That when given the right conditions, right, that the body has an innate healing capacity, right? Even the brain, right, which we know we've traditionally taught was very not malleable, right? We know that there's neuroplasticity, we know there's neurogenesis. Even the brain, right, has the capacity to heal itself. And I think the tools that we share, from my perspective, the point is to create the conditions for healing to occur. And that the mind and the spirit are just like the body. The mind and the spirit are pre-programmed for spontaneous healing. They're pre-programmed to heal and to self-correct when the conditions for healing are created. And what we do is create the conditions for healing to occur. And ultimately, it's the tools that do that, right? So if I invite everyone to take a nice deep inhale with me right now, I will be able to predict with 100% accuracy what everyone's going to do next, right? We're going to exhale. All right, I can invite you to take another deep inhale. And this time, hold your breath, control your breath for a minute, and then exhale slowly so that your exhale is controlled and comes out a little bit more slowly than your inhale. Right, and you could even do that again. And we know that the tools of yoga, right, the breath, meditation, movement, they create a sense of predictability in the body and the mind and the breath. They create a sense of control, right, which again is that empowerment. And so all of our tools are based on the fact that you're whole, you're perfect, and you don't need to be fixed, we're going to create the conditions to allow the healing process to do what it automatically does. And so we do that through 4 main programs. One is we bring yoga to veterans. So last year we documented 17,000 visits. Most of these visits are happening at VAs or at vet centers, other treatment programs. Other ones are happening out in the community. We do that online and in person. We have our VYP app now, and you can download and practice live breathing and meditation and yoga with us every day. The second program we have is a mindful resilience for compassion fatigue program. I don't know how many of you are caregivers, either personal or professional, and how many of you may have experienced some level of burnout or compassion fatigue lately. My hand is raised. We're certainly dealing with a bit of an issue in the healthcare industry of excessive burnout and retention issues for organization. So working with the caregivers specifically to alleviate their own symptoms. And then our sort of flagship program is our Mindful Resilience for Trauma Recovery program. And this is where we train yoga teachers and mental health clinicians about using yoga and mindfulness in a way that maximizes the ability for these tools to lead to healing and to minimize the risk that they would do any harm. And then our final program is one where we're actually bringing veterans who have used these tools themselves for their own recovery, who have used these own tools for their own resilience, to be able to become yoga teachers themselves. So our 200-hour training program for yoga teacher training, of which at least one person here on this panel is a graduate of our first ever program. That would be you, Josh, who are now out there bringing yoga to other veterans. And so that's part of what we do as Veterans Yoga Project.
Thank you so much, Dan. I certainly hear a lot of similarities between I Love Your Brain and Veterans Yoga Project. And some of those similarities were the yoga and mindfulness piece. And I know we started out talking about brainwave therapy, which I haven't heard talked about quite as much. So, Dr. Wan, what is brainwave therapy?
Yeah. So I think in this area of neuroscience, there have been so many innovations and advances over the last decade. It's really been remarkable. And part of that too ties into some of the studies and observations related to yoga and meditation. And specifically when we use a technology called EEG, which is an electrophysiologic brain map, we observe increases in what are called alpha coherence and alpha density. What alpha is a dominant wavelength with which your brain communicates information. And so our first step is to get this EEG, this brain map. It's about a 10-minute study. And through that information, we can pull actually quite useful information. We can look for areas of neural disruption, which, as we mentioned earlier, with TBI and PTSD, this tends to be one of the hallmarks of these conditions. And once we identify that, frankly, it's illuminating to a lot of individuals in the sense that the geographic location of the injury can inform us a lot about how each individual might be experiencing their world. So we use that information to first find where the dominant alpha frequency is. It's generally between 8 and 13 hertz, which means each individual may be encoding information 8 to 13 times per second. The norm across a large database tends to be right around 10 hertz. But in a scenario where, let's say, somebody may be firing at 30 hertz in their visual cortex, they're scanning their environment 30 times per second, but only able to process 10 times per second. That information overload may manifest as anxiety. And many times this kind of illuminates something that could not be captured, for example, on an MRI or CT scan. Those are wonderful neuroimages that tell us about anatomy, but are limited in what they'll tell us about function. EEG is a little different in the sense it's like a video. It's recording over a time domain. And it lets us know how the brain is functioning over a period of time, kind of the difference between a video and a still image. In a different scenario, if somebody's prefrontal cortex is firing too slow, it's the stereotypical manifestation or waveform pattern associated with depression. So if an area is firing at 4 hertz and we see the rest of the brain is firing at 11 hertz, this individual may lack motivation, feel lethargic, not want to get out of bed. And so just a simple action of capturing this electrophysiologic brain map gives us a lot of useful, actionable information. And our third step is to use an FDA-approved device called transcranial magnetic stimulation. And we've also innovated a portable device that's we're hoping to go into production within the next quarter or two. But we can use these devices to geo-navigate to any area of the brain where we're seeing neurons misfiring. And we can give them a friendly reminder that they want to be firing at that alpha frequency. And over time, over a period of days to weeks, we see realignment and improved coherence of the brain activity. And symptoms fairly predictably will improve over time when we use this methodology. And much like Dr. Libby was sharing, nature engineered us to be healing organisms. And whether you put 2 ends of a wound margin together and allow it to heal, or 2 ends of a broken bone together and allow it to heal, sometimes the brain gets stuck in incorrect frequency, and it just needs this friendly reminder to move in the right direction. And so we're now well into some FDA clinical trials pursuing an indication and approval for traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder. The early data is that we're seeing about 80% clinical response rate, and there's some definitions around that. A PCL-5 score improvement of greater than 30% and a RPQ-16, the River-Mead post-concussion questionnaire, an improvement greater than 8 units. And we can share later, we graciously received funding from Wounded Warrior Project and Special Operations Care Fund to treat veterans out of our San Diego and Cardiff offices. But it's been really exciting to see those types of changes. And where we see the future is combination therapies. There's no reason why people should be limited to a single modality. If we add yoga and meditation to that, things that are very accessible and that people, these are skills people can learn very readily, we see a pretty nonlinear benefit. And so it's something we encourage all of our patients to practice. And as time moves on, I think we're going to see more and more studies. I know in speaking to Dr. Pierce, they're doing a really well-designed study in Illinois. And so I'm excited to see what the future holds there. But I'll pause there and just excited to see how all these different modalities can work together.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wan. I agree. I'm hearing a lot of similarities. It sounds like y'all are kind of saying very similar things, the same end state, which is really nice. I liked hearing that traumatic events lack safety, predictability, and control, both internally and externally. I am flabbergasted that there are 636,000 different types of PTSD. That is quite a few. I really liked how Kyla explained TBI, of thinking about it like a building that hit an earthquake, that sometimes there's damage that we just don't see, the piping, smaller things, and that really makes a difference. And Dr. Wan, it really seems like your agency is really able to show this with the EEG, to show that some of this is helping out. So it's all really connected, which is, why we're here. But I would love to go to some audience questions. So the first one for you, Dr. Wan, can you speak on the viability and usefulness of fMRI, if at all, in TBI diagnosis and treatment?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a fairly nuanced question in that fMRI came under a lot of scrutiny. Within the last month, there was a publication that found that the variability between fMRI machines and protocols was sufficient that it sort of called into question a lot of the research that had been done. over the last couple of decades. So I think some of it is still TBD in large population size studies and cohorts. But I disagree in the sense that I think much of the work and the research that's been done has really advanced the science. And, I think there's a lot of applicability to fMRI, and it's giving us a level of spatial resolution that's fairly unmatched in the neuroscience world. And so much like science evolves and improves and progresses over time, by no means do I think it's a finished product. But I do think that there is certainly utility in it in individual cases, and looking for disruptions in neural networks similar to the EEG. The fMRI can give us very useful information. But yeah, still work to be done in that arena.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wang. So for the group, from the audience, we are receiving a bunch of questions about people that live in maybe Canada or rural parts of the United States. And where can these people find resources to help with TBI and PTS? Maybe I can punt that to Dr. Dan.
So the question being is, where do we find resources to practice? Well, I think you're at the right place. I would say loveyourbrain.com and VYveteransYogaProject.org, certainly for the practices. I think it's really important, and I think my colleagues emphasized the need for integrative treatment approaches, right? It's not a one or another, right? It's a this and yoga, I say yoga doesn't cure PTSD, right? It's a really important part of a comprehensive treatment approach. So what I would say is that finding local resources, what we also know, I think, is that, and I'm sure this is true for traumatic brain injury as well, but community social support is one of the, leading protective factors against, various illnesses and disorders, and one of the, healing factors from those disorders. And so encouraging folks to find ways to find local sources of social support, and getting professional help when necessary. I think a lot of us are reluctant to seek out professional support because it's hard and it's a pain in the butt. And in the case of PTSD, avoidance is one of the symptoms. But I can't overemphasize enough the importance of really having a team, having people on your side. So using the resources that we have, right, at both of our organizations, and looking, I don't know, Dr. Wan would have to answer about where, this type of, EEG wave neurofeedback, I don't know, I'm sorry, what you call it. But that you'd have to answer where you can find those resources. And then when you're ready, I have a question too for Dr. Wan, but I'll hold that for now.
Sure. Yeah, we recognize some of the challenges of accessibility in areas that are a little more rural. Most of our centers are in major metropolitan areas. We have about 70 centers around the US. And this is why we've innovated a portable device. And so we're going into production. It's been researched. Department of Veterans Affairs did a nice publication looking at the safety and efficacy for post-traumatic stress. And we're looking to move into an FDA grade trial. But currently we're using it as a wellness device, a neuro wellness device. And that's something that we could ship to a number of different areas. So the clinic-based technology we call magnetic EEG guided resonance therapy, or MERT. The base technology, TMS, is called transcranial magnetic stimulation. And so that's, in medical parlance, a relatively recent innovation in that TMS was approved within the last 15 years. And MERT has been accessible for roughly about 5 to 6 years. And so we're trying to grow the footprint But to Dr. Libby's point, and I think Dr. Pierce's point, learning how to employ yoga and meditation that's accessible in many areas. Telehealth, telemed is making a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy more accessible. And so there are innovations that are improving the accessibility of resources, even in remote areas. But WAVE, we're certainly striving to reach those areas as well.
And I'll just quickly add on, Josh, before you hop to the next question, is just reiterating what Dan was saying about the impacts of social isolation. I mean, there's research that shows social isolation lowers life expectancy as much as obesity and smoking. So I think a huge benefit to the pandemic has been that we've all learned how to offer online programming that does create different adaptations and accessibility priorities to meet the specific needs of our communities. So I know with TBI, screen sensitivity is a big issue. So our programming has many strategies to mitigate the impacts of screen sensitivity and many other things. So just really encourage folks to look at the programs that VYP and Love Your Brain have that you can sign up for literally today, right after this call, that will be there to support you, if nothing else, to feel validated, seen, and heard in your experience by joining a community that understands. And that cannot be, the power of that cannot be minimized.
So this is, we're coming towards the end of our time, and I really can't thank our panelists enough. To Dr. Pierce, Dr. Libby, and Dr. Wan. Thank you all so much, and a huge bit of gratitude to Veterans Yoga Project, Love Your Brain, and Wave Neuroscience. I'd like to end really briefly with a nice, big, full, beautiful inhale. Exhale, sigh it away. Inhale one more time. Exhale, sigh it away.
Well, I, for one, think that was just too short, and we really should have scheduled this for 2 hours because we just got started.
We did just get started. I am going to quickly run through, before everyone pops off, some resources that we have. There are so many. So first of all, thank you, Josh. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Kyla. Thank you, Eric. There have been so many comments in the chat about how helpful it's been and how amazing it's been and how much people already love Your Brain and VYP. And all our teachers have gotten many compliments. So the work is happening. It's getting out there. As part of the partnership that VYP and Love Your Brain have developed, we are also partnering up to offer, and I don't know if Alexandra can share the slides. I don't know where she went. We are partnering up to offer a Veterans Mindset Affinity Group. Oh, here we go. We'll get there. There we go. A Veterans Mindset Affinity Group, which was what Kyla was referring to. It is a 6-week yoga and discussion program that starts on Tuesday, October 11th at 10 a.m. Eastern and will run for 6 weeks. I have had the privilege of seeing these, and they are truly life-changing. And we have so many remarks in the chat about people who have taken them. So if you are a veteran and if you would like to join us, please scan the QR code and sign up now. If you are a caregiver, there is also a caregiver affinity group this go round, and there are many others if you have been affected by TBI. They also have, you will see, their Love Your Brain yoga teacher trainings. If you would like to teach for the TBI population, again, amazing. We are also at Veterans Yoga Project offering TBI-friendly yoga classes and ongoing support in our VYP online studio and our app. These are taught by teachers who have been trained by both VYP and Love Your Brain. These are available every day, live and online. All are welcome, completely free. Please visit the Veterans Yoga Project to find our online studio or download our app. You can also become certified to teach veterans or anyone affected by trauma, and you can get 15% off our training courses by using the code LYB15. Visit our website and you will see all of those laid out right there. We are also excited to share that post 9/11 veterans can receive treatment at Wave Neuro at no cost through the Wounded Warrior Project at the San Diego and Cardiff locations. The first 20 non-military inquiries can also receive a complimentary EEG and review at the Brain Care Performance Center in Cardiff. And once again, thank you all so much for being here. Today is World Gratitude Day, and I am so grateful for you. All of us at Love Your Brain and at Veterans Yoga Project and at Wave Neuro are so grateful for you. We could not do what we do without this amazing community. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your continued support. And if you would like to get involved with any of these organizations, please reach out to us. Our social links are there, or you can reach out via our websites. Thank you so much. I know there was a lot of questions we weren't able to answer, but I think maybe we might set up another one of these. Thank you, and everybody have a wonderful day.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all.
We love you,
Thank you
Kyla.
for everything.